The afternoon sun hangs low over Maple Hollow, throwing long golden shadows across the cracked sidewalks. A frail woman moves slowly along the quiet street, each step heavy with the weight of her grocery bags. Cars hum faintly in the distance, but no one notices her struggle. No one except a young patrol officer driving by. He slows down, watching her stumble slightly, and something inside him says to stop. She tries to wave him off, proud, silent, hiding something deep within. But as she bends to pick up a rolling apple, a small metal object slips from her coat pocket and catches the light. It glints once. Bright, unmistakable. The officer steps closer, heart pounding. What is a Medal of Honor doing in the hands of a woman carrying groceries alone? And why does she look so afraid to be seen? The officer breaks the silence, his voice gentle but uncertain. He offers to carry her bags, but she hesitates, her eyes fixed on the pavement. The world around them feels paused, as if holding its breath. Her refusal isn't pride, it's protection. There's something heavy behind that quiet tone, something she doesn't want remembered. The sound of a passing truck snaps the moment back to life. Reluctantly, she nods, allowing him to take one bag. For the first time, she looks at him, not as a stranger, but as someone who might understand what silence costs. They walk side by side down the narrow sidewalk, her steps slow and measured. She speaks little, her words short and practical. Yet every pause feels full of meaning left unsaid. He glances at her from time to time, wanting to ask about the medal but afraid of trespassing on sacred ground. The sun sinks lower, and their shadows stretch long ahead of them. Two silhouettes carrying burdens neither can see. The sound of her cane tapping softly against the ground becomes their only rhythm. At a street corner, she pauses, glancing toward a row of quiet houses. Her breathing slows as if remembering something. Daniel asks where she lives, and her voice trembles slightly when she answers. Each word feels carefully chosen, as if she's afraid the wrong one will open old wounds. She mentions her husband just once, and then stops speaking. The silence that follows says everything. He understands it instantly. They reach her small brick house at the edge of town. The porch light flickers weakly, and the wooden steps creak as she climbs them. Daniel sets her groceries by the door, unsure whether to stay or go. She thanks him softly, her voice thin but sincere. Then she looks down at the bag, at the hidden metal beneath the groceries. And for the first time, there's a flicker of fear, or maybe regret, in her eyes. He sees it too, and the question forms quietly in his mind. What story could make a hero hide her own honor? Inside her small house, the air feels heavy with stillness. Daniel steps inside only after she insists, his boots quiet on the worn rug. The walls are lined with faded photographs, faces in uniform, frozen smiles from long ago. She moves slowly, setting the groceries on a narrow counter, never turning her back for long. He wants to ask about the medal, but instead he says something simple. How peaceful her home is. She nods faintly, though her eyes betray something else entirely. Peace isn't what lives here. Memory does. He notices a photo on the wall. Young soldiers beside a helicopter, smiles wide, eyes bright with the kind of courage only youth knows. She catches his glance and speaks softly, almost to herself, saying those faces have been gone for decades. Her voice cracks, and the silence afterward is unbearable. Daniel lowers his head in respect, realizing he's not standing in a stranger's home, but in a living monument. She pours 2 cups of tea, her hands trembling slightly. The sound of the kettle fills the silence like an old song. Daniel thanks her, still unsure how to ask the question pressing on his mind. When she finally sits, she looks at him with eyes that have seen too much. She tells him she once served, a long time ago, then looks away before explaining more. Her words drift like smoke, thin, fragile, and full of things unsaid. Daniel finally asks about the medal, his tone low, his words careful. She stiffens instantly, the color fading from her face. For a long moment, she doesn't speak. Then, with a small sigh, she says it was never hers to keep. She turns toward the window, where the sky has deepened into violet. Her reflection stares back, half shadow, half memory. Daniel realizes her silence isn't about shame. It's about loss so great that even glory feels like a burden. The kettle whistles again, but neither moves to stop it. She finally whispers that some medals weigh more than they shine. Daniel feels a chill crawl down his spine. He understands now that what she carries isn't a decoration. It's a story too painful to tell. The whistle fades, replaced by quiet rain beginning to fall outside. She closes her eyes as if listening to something distant. Maybe the echo of a voice long gone. He says nothing. Sometimes, silence says enough. Her living room feels colder than before, though the lamps are still lit. Photos line the walls, young soldiers laughing, faces full of life, and one or two missing. Daniel notices a small wooden box on a shelf, worn and scratched. She doesn't speak at first. Then, almost reluctantly, she lifts the lid, revealing ribbons, medals, and folded letters. Her hands tremble as if touching memories that still ache. Daniel realizes he is not just a guest in a house, but in a past etched with sacrifice. One photograph catches Daniel's eye, a younger Evelyn in uniform, smiling slightly despite the dust on her face, her eyes fierce. She notices him looking and quietly says this was the day everything changed. Her voice is steady but faintly trembles. Daniel doesn't push, only nods, sensing the weight behind her words. Outside, the wind rustles the trees, as if echoing the distant sound of battle. She recounts a single mission, the one that changed everything. Her hands trace the edge of a medal, her voice tight. Daniel listens without interruption. She speaks of fear, loss, and the choices no one outside the war could understand. His chest tightens as the story unfolds. In this room, decades collapse and Daniel glimpses the cost of heroism that rarely shows in medals or ceremonies. She pauses, staring at the floor, letting the story hang in the air. Daniel feels a heavy silence, almost unbearable. He notices the framed pictures of soldiers missing from the original squad, the ones who didn't come home. She whispers their names one by one. They are more than images. They are ghosts that linger in her quiet house. He realizes that each medal carries untold sorrow, and the medal in her pocket is a silent witness to loss beyond comprehension. Finally, she sits back down, pulling the medal from her pocket, staring at it without speaking. Daniel holds his breath. She says quietly that it was never about recognition. It was about survival, about keeping promises to people who could no longer speak for themselves. The weight of her words settles in the room like a dense fog. Outside, night has fallen, and the quiet hum of the town presses against the house, a gentle reminder that the world goes on while some memories never do. Evelyn's hands shake slightly as she opens a worn notebook yellowed with age. She flips through pages filled with cramped handwriting, letters never sent, and sketches of comrades long gone. Her voice trembles as she begins to speak of the day she saved her entire unit. She describes chaos, smoke, and fear, every heartbeat measured against the chance of survival. Daniel listens silently, heart tightening, realizing the bravery she carried silently for decades. She pauses to catch her breath, the room thick with the weight of her memories. Her voice softens as she speaks of her husband, the one who never came home. Daniel feels the silence stretch between them like a chasm. The Medal of Honor in her pocket isn't a symbol of pride, she says. It's a reminder of lives lost, promises broken and courage tested in ways most people can't imagine. She recounts the mission in fragments, flashbacks of smoke, shouting and comrades falling beside her. Daniel imagines the chaos, the fear, the impossible choices she made. Every detail she shares leaves him more stunned, more respectful, more aware that heroism is often invisible. Her eyes hold both the weight of what she survived and the sorrow of those she couldn't save. She pauses again, staring at a photograph of her squad. Each face holds a story Daniel will never forget. She whispers their names one by one, tracing them with her finger. The air is heavy, as if the room itself remembers. Daniel feels the weight of decades of silence pressing down, realizing that the real cost of war is never written in medals or headlines. It's carried quietly in the hearts of those who lived it. Finally, she closes the notebook and places it gently on the table. She says softly that every medal she earned carries someone else's story, someone she can never forget. Daniel sits in silence, overwhelmed by the courage and sacrifice in front of him. Outside, the night has grown deep, and the quiet of the town presses against the windows. He realizes that some stories are so heavy they can only be carried in silence, and that some heroes are still fighting battles the world will never see. Evelyn sits quietly, staring out the window as rain begins to fall. She talks softly about the years after the war, the loneliness that crept in like shadows over her life. She speaks of empty houses, forgotten friends, and letters that never came. Daniel listens, realizing that her battle didn't end with medals or missions. It continued long after, in the silence of a world that had moved on. The rain patters gently against the glass, echoing the quiet ache of a lifetime carried alone. She describes the years spent trying to return to normal life. Jobs she couldn't hold, friendships that dissolved, and the haunting emptiness of civilian streets that felt foreign after battlefields. Daniel realizes the medal she carries isn't just for bravery in combat. It's a symbol of the courage required to survive a world that forgot her. The silence between them speaks louder than words, carrying decades of pain, resilience, and quiet endurance. She whispers of nights spent awake, haunted by memories of fallen comrades, haunted by the faces of those she couldn't save. Daniel feels the weight of her words pressing on him. He begins to understand that the true battle of a veteran isn't fought in the field. It's fought afterward, in quiet rooms, and in the heart that refuses to forget. Each story she tells lingers, like smoke curling in the still air. She sighs softly, recounting the subtle loneliness of a life where everyone else moved on. Holidays passed quietly. Letters went unanswered, and the world rarely asked how she truly was. Daniel realizes that the medal in her pocket is a symbol not only of valor, but also of the endurance required to live with memories that never fade. He feels a quiet obligation to honor the weight she carries daily. Finally, she looks at Daniel directly, her voice quiet but unwavering. She admits that some battles never end, that every day is a test of endurance and memory. Daniel nods slowly, understanding that the world may never fully recognize her courage, but he will never forget. The rain outside eases, leaving only quiet, reflective light in the room. For a moment, the weight of decades seems lighter, shared between them in mutual understanding. Daniel drives her to the town memorial, the streets quiet in the early morning light. Evelyn's hands rest lightly on her lap, clutching the medal, her gaze fixed on the passing trees. She says little, but the weight of her presence is undeniable. The world seems to pause as they approach the memorial, the stone engraved with names of soldiers lost and remembered. For a moment, the past and present collide, and Daniel feels the depth of the courage carried silently for decades. They arrive at the memorial. Evelyn steps down carefully, the gravel crunching under her worn shoes. Daniel lifts the groceries from the car, his eyes catching the engraved names. She stops before the stone, silent, letting the gravity of the place settle around her. For the first time in decades, she allows herself to feel the honor not as a burden, but as recognition of lives lived and sacrificed. She kneels briefly, tracing the names of soldiers who never returned. Daniel stands beside her, quietly holding her bag, feeling the weight of decades of sacrifice and silent bravery. She looks up at him, a faint tear glistening in her eye. In that glance, words aren't needed. The shared understanding says more than any conversation could. The metal in her pocket catches the sunlight, glinting faintly, as if acknowledging its rightful place in the world. Daniel asks her to stand beside the engraved names. She hesitates, then slowly straightens. The morning sun bathes her silver hair in gold. He salutes her, and without hesitation she returns the gesture, trembling but proud. The moment is suspended, both fragile and eternal. A salute not just for herself, but for all who cannot stand here today. For the first time in decades, she allows herself to weep openly. Daniel remains silent, understanding that this is not sadness but release. The memorial, the medal, the lost comrades, and the silent years all converge in this single moment. When she finally lowers her hand, there is a quiet strength in her posture. She is both a survivor and a hero, and the world, even if briefly, has remembered her. The next morning, Maple Hollow wakes slowly under a pale sun. Evelyn sits at her small kitchen table, the Medal of Honor resting lightly in her pocket. She stares out the window at the quiet street, listening to the distant hum of life. For the first time in years, she feels the calm after her storm of memories. Daniel visits briefly, giving her a reassuring nod before leaving. She doesn't speak. Her silence now feels full, not heavy. The medal stays close, a symbol of both courage and restraint. She takes a slow breath and rises, walking to the door. The grocery bags from yesterday remain untouched. She steps outside into the crisp morning air, carrying only herself and the medal she never wished to display. The town is waking, but no one notices the quiet hero among them. For her, that has always been the way. It is not recognition she seeks, but the freedom to live with her memories in peace. She walks toward the town memorial one last time. The stone stands silent, names etched deeply into its surface. She kneels briefly, placing the medal on the memorial. It catches the light, gleaming softly, as if acknowledging the lives it represents. Evelyn steps back, allowing the medal to rest in public memory while she remains unseen. A hero in the shadows, quietly honoring her past. Evelyn steps back, eyes soft but firm, watching the medal rest in the sunlight. She does not look for applause, nor does she need it. In her silence, she has completed the final act of honoring those she loved, those she lost, and herself. Daniel nods quietly, understanding that some heroes will never be celebrated loudly, yet their courage will ripple silently through the lives they touched. The camera lingers on the medal alone on the memorial stone, sunlight glinting off its surface as leaves drift past. Evelyn walks away, her figure small against the wide street, disappearing into the quiet town. She carries nothing but memory and courage, leaving the world to hold her story for her. Two questions linger, unspoken, echoing in the morning light. What if the real war never ends? What happens when a hero chooses to be forgotten?